The massive dome stretched above like a frozen ocean of crystal, its walls shimmering with colors that had no names in any human language. Ambassador David Reed stood at the center of the enormous chamber, feeling smaller than an ant beneath the towering alien forms that surrounded him on all sides. This was the Galactic Council's Judgment Hall, where the fates of entire species were decided. Hundreds of alien beings filled the curved tiers that rose in perfect circles around the chamber floor. Some floated in glowing energy fields, others clung to the walls with dozens of insect-like legs, and a few existed as pure light that hurt to look at directly. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the power of these ancient civilizations, each one representing worlds that had existed for thousands of years before humans had even discovered fire. Reed kept his breathing steady as alien voices filled the air around him. The translator device in his ear worked overtime, converting clicks, whistles, and sounds like grinding metal into words he could understand. But the tone needed no translation. This was a trial, and humanity was the accused. The species known as human stands before this council, announced a towering creature whose skin looked like living rock. Its voice boomed through the chamber like an earthquake. They are charged with unauthorized expansion beyond their designated sector. They have established colonies in 17 star systems without permission. Most serious of all, they have deployed military forces in violation of galactic law. Reed watched as holographic displays appeared in the air around him, showing star maps with red dots marking human settlements. To the aliens watching, these dots probably looked like a dangerous infection spreading through their carefully ordered galaxy. They had no idea how right they were. High Chancellor Vexani leaned forward from the highest tier of the chamber. She was an ancient being whose tentacled form had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of authority. Ambassador Reed, your species was granted junior membership in this council only 50 years ago. In that brief time, you have shown nothing but disrespect for our laws and traditions. The evidence against you is overwhelming. How do you answer these charges? Every alien eye in the chamber focused on the lone human figure standing below. Reed could feel their collective gaze like a physical weight pressing down on him. Most species that stood in this position either begged for mercy or raged against the injustice. Reed did neither. Instead, he smiled. Honored Chancellor, esteemed council members, Reed said, his voice calm and conversational in the massive space. I believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of my species. A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through the alien assembly. The rock-skinned prosecutor's eyes glowed brighter with amusement. Misunderstanding? Your ships have been detected far beyond your authorized territory. Your colonies exist on worlds that belong to the Council's preservation zones. What possible misunderstanding could explain such blatant violations? Reed reached into his simple black jacket and pulled out a datapad. It looked primitive compared to the advanced technology surrounding him, but it served its purpose. He touched the screen, and suddenly the air above him came alive with light. A three-dimensional star map materialized, showing their local section of the galaxy in perfect detail. The 17 red dots that marked humanity's known colonies pulsed gently in the display. Every alien in the chamber recognized the image immediately. These are the colonies you mentioned, Reed said, gesturing to the glowing points. You are absolutely correct. We do have settlements in these systems. The assembled delegates leaned forward, sensing that something was wrong but unable to grasp what it might be. The evidence was clear. The human had admitted guilt and the trial should have been over. Reed touched his datapad again. New dots appeared on the map. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Then thousands. They spread across the display like stars being born, filling regions of space that the Council had believed were empty. The red points multiplied and expanded until they covered nearly a quarter of the visible galaxy. The chamber erupted in chaos. Alien voices rose in a symphony of clicks, roars, and harmonic vibrations as the true scope of human expansion became clear. Some delegates stood from their seats. Others activated their own scanning devices to verify what they were seeing, and a few simply stared in shock at the impossible display. High Chancellor Vexani's tentacles writhed in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. This cannot be accurate. Our sensor networks would have detected such massive expansion. Our monitoring systems cover every inhabited region of the galaxy. Your monitoring systems, Reed replied, his voice never rising above normal conversation levels despite the chaos around him. Detected exactly what we wanted them to detect. The chamber began to quiet as the implications of his words sank in. Reed touched his datapad once more, and the display zoomed in on a specific region of space. It was an area that every council member knew well. The neutral zone, a buffer, region between major civilizations that was supposed to be completely uninhabited. New markers appeared throughout the zone, revealing massive space stations, industrial complexes, and what could only be military installations hidden in the cosmic radiation of dead stars and drifting asteroid fields. For 50 years, Reed continued, his words falling into the stunned silence like stones into still water. You have been watching our merchant vessels, our diplomatic ships, and our announced colonies. You cataloged every human you could see and felt confident in your superior wisdom and ancient technology. He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the hundreds of alien faces staring down at him. Some showed fear, others confusion, and a few displayed what might have been respect. But you never thought to look for the humans you could not see. The rock-skinned prosecutor's glowing eyes dimmed with what looked like dawning horror. The shadow regions, the dead zones we avoided. You were hiding in the spaces between stars themselves. Reed nodded slowly. Every system you considered worthless, every region of space you deemed too dangerous or unprofitable to explore, every cosmic anomaly you chose to ignore, we were there. While this council debated our fate and planned our future, humanity was already everywhere. High Chancellor Vexani's ancient voice trembled for the first time in millennia. What do you want from us? For the first time since entering the chamber, Ambassador Reed's calm expression shifted. His smile became something altogether more dangerous. Want? Honored Chancellor, I think you misunderstand the situation completely. This is not a negotiation. This is not even a trial. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, yet somehow every being in the vast chamber heard every word clearly. This is a revelation. Reed touched his datapad one final time. Every human installation shown on the display, both visible and hidden, simultaneously transmitted a signal that the chamber's sensors immediately detected. The aliens watched, in growing horror as they realized what they were witnessing. Every human asset in the galaxy had just come online at once, and they were all waiting for orders. The age of human secrecy was over. The age of human dominance had begun. The council chamber remained frozen in the aftermath of Reed's revelation. Emergency alarms flickered across alien communication devices as delegates desperately tried to contact their homeworlds, their fleets, their governments. Most received only static and silence. High Chancellor Vexani sat motionless in her elevated throne, her ancient mind struggling to process what she had witnessed. Around her, panic spread through the assembled representatives like wildfire. My battle fleet is not responding, Admiral Corks muttered, his massive reptilian claws scraping against his command console. The 3-meter-tall warrior looked shrunken and defeated, as his screen showed nothing but dead communication channels. Our trade networks have gone dark, reported the crystalline Veltari representative, her translucent body flickering with erratic patterns of distress. Every monitoring station in our territory has stopped transmitting data. Ambassador Reed remained in the center of the chamber, watching the chaos unfold with the detached interest of a scientist observing an experiment. When he spoke again, his voice cut through the noise like a knife through silk. May I have your attention? The effect was immediate and terrifying. Every sound ceased, every movement stopped. It was as if the entire chamber suddenly realized that the only person with answers was the one they had been trying to judge moments before. I understand your confusion, Reed continued, his tone conversational and calm. For thousands of years, this council has operated under a simple assumption that information flows upward from member species to the governing body. You built your power on knowing more than those you ruled. He paused, studying the alien faces around him. It must be disturbing to discover that your foundation was built on empty space. The blob-like Mektar delegate released a cloud of chemical signals that the translators converted to words of barely controlled panic. What have you done to our systems? Our people? Our worlds? Nothing, Reed replied, and that single word somehow carried more threat than any declaration of war. We have simply made ourselves known. Every shadow installation we built, every hidden base we established, every secret outpost we constructed, they are all still there, all still functioning. The only thing that has changed is your awareness of them. High Chancellor Vexani found her voice again, though it sounded hollow in the vast space. You speak of secrets and shadows, but the reality remains clear. This council commands the loyalty of thousands of species across the galaxy. Whatever you have accomplished in hiding, you cannot control such vastness. Reed's expression grew thoughtful, almost philosophical. Control is a fascinating concept, Honored Chancellor. Tell me, have you ever watched a puppet show? The question clearly puzzled the ancient being. What does that have to do with anything? A puppet show is entertainment where wooden figures dance and perform on strings, guided by someone the audience cannot see. The watchers follow the story, laugh at the jokes, and cheer for the heroes. But the real performance happens above the stage, where invisible hands pull the strings that make it all possible. A terrible silence settled over the chamber as understanding began to dawn. For 50 years, Reed continued, this council has performed brilliantly for the galaxy's citizens. You maintained peace, settled disputes, managed resources, and prevented wars. The puppet show has been quite entertaining. His smile was sharp as a blade. But you were never the ones pulling the strings. Admiral Cork slammed his fist against his console, the sound echoing like thunder through the chamber. Impossible. The Republic answers to no one. We are a sovereign power. The Republic answers to its supply lines, Reed corrected gently. Food shipments that arrive exactly when needed. Fuel convoys that somehow avoid all pirate attacks. Medical supplies that appear during plague outbreaks. For 40 years, your people have prospered because these necessities flowed smoothly across space. He tilted his head slightly. Did you ever wonder who ensured that flow remained uninterrupted? The reptilian admiral's yellow eyes widened as comprehension struck him. The shipping companies. The transport guilds, owned, operated, or influenced by humans, Reed confirmed. Not directly, of course. Through shell corporations, puppet governments, and carefully placed individuals who rose to positions of authority through merit and circumstance. The beauty of economic control is that the targets never realize they are under attack. They only see prosperity and growth. The Veltari representative's crystalline form had stabilized into patterns of pure shock. The mineral contracts, the crystal harvesting rights, negotiated by firms with human ownership buried so deep in corporate structures that even we sometimes forget where our influence ends and authentic alien enterprise begins. Reed's voice carried genuine admiration. Your crystal technology truly is remarkable. It was worth the 30-year investment to ensure preferential access to it. High Chancellor Vexani's tentacles had begun their slow writhing motion again, but now it seemed less like thought and more like the movements of something dying. The Zephyrin extinction 15 years ago. You said you knew about classified events. Were you involved in their destruction? Involved? No. Reed's voice carried what might have been regret. We simply allowed it to happen. The Zephyrins had discovered some of our installations in their system. They were preparing to expose our operations to the Council. When the plague struck their worlds, it solved several problems at once. The casual admission of complicity in genocide sent shockwaves through the chamber. Several delegates began backing away from Reed as if his very presence might be dangerous. You are monsters, whispered the insect-like Corval representative. Reed considered this accusation carefully, perhaps, though I would argue that we are simply more honest about necessity than you are. This council has overseen the extinction of 47 species in the past century alone, all in the name of galactic stability. The difference is that when we eliminate a threat, we do not pretend it is for their own good. He touched his datapad again, and the holographic display returned with a different image. This time it showed a map of the galaxy marked with graveyards of dead civilizations, slave worlds, and resource extraction sites stripped of all life. This is your legacy, Reed said quietly. 50,000 years of guided evolution and managed expansion, that has left the galaxy littered with the bones of species that dared to resist your vision of order. You created a system where the strong devour the weak, then convinced yourselves it was justice. The display zoomed in on Earth's solar system, showing not just the human homeworld, but massive defensive installations now visible throughout the asteroid belt and outer planets. We learned from your example, Reed continued. We simply decided not to wait our turn as prey. High Chancellor Vexani struggled to her feet, her ancient frame trembling with effort and age. What happens now? Do you simply take our place? Become the new council? Reed's laugh was genuinely amused. Take your place? Honored Chancellor. Why would we want to sit in judgment chambers and debate territorial disputes? Why would we want to manage resource allocations and mediate trade disagreements? That sounds exhausting and boring. He gestured to the display, which now showed resource flows, information networks, and influence patterns throughout the galaxy. A vast web with human assets at every crucial junction. We prefer the shadows, he said. We prefer to remain unseen, unknown, unacknowledged. Let the galaxy continue believing that their elected leaders make the decisions that matter. Let them think their governments hold real power. Let them maintain their illusions of independence and self-determination. The terrible truth crystallized in every alien mind present. Humanity did not want to rule the galaxy openly. They already ruled it from the shadows, and they preferred their subjects not to know it. The Council will continue to function, Reed announced. You will return to your worlds, resume your duties, and govern your people exactly as you always have. Trade will flow, disputes will be resolved, and peace will be maintained. He paused, letting hope flicker in alien eyes before crushing it completely. But now you know who really makes the decisions. 6 hours had passed since the session was suspended. During that time, delegates huddled in small groups throughout the council's side chambers, their voices barely above whispers as they tried to understand the magnitude of their situation. Some wept according to their species' customs. Others raged against impossible circumstances. A few simply sat in stunned silence, their minds unable to process the revelation. Ambassador Reed had remained in the main chamber throughout the break, sitting calmly at the defendant's table as if waiting for delayed transport, rather than presiding over the collapse of galactic order. When the session reconvened, the delegates returned to find him exactly where they had left him, his expression unchanged. High Chancellor Vexani moved slowly to her position, each step betraying the weight of her enormous age. When she spoke, her voice carried the sound of absolute defeat. We have consulted with our governments, she began. Most report similar phenomena. Critical systems offline, military assets unresponsive, key personnel unreachable. Several of our worlds have experienced what they describe as infrastructure failures that crippled their ability to function without outside assistance. Assistance that arrived remarkably quickly, observed the Veltari representative. Her crystalline form now dim with exhaustion. Human aid ships appeared at our colonies within hours of the system failures. They brought replacement parts, technical expertise, and temporary solutions to problems they somehow knew about in advance. Reed nodded approvingly. Humanity has always believed in rapid disaster response. We find it wise to be prepared for any emergency. Admiral Corks had clearly not slept during the break. His massive frame slumped in his chair and his voice was rough with fatigue. My battle fleet. They are alive. You could have killed them all with your computer virus, but you chose not to. Why? Because dead fleets serve no useful purpose, Reed replied. Disabled fleets, however, provide excellent examples of the nature of dependency. Your crews are unharmed, Admiral. Their life support systems, emergency food supplies, and water recyclers continue to function perfectly. They can survive indefinitely in their current state, but they cannot move, cannot fight, cannot operate their weapons, cannot threaten human installations, Reed agreed, which was, after all, the entire point of the exercise. The Mektar delegate had released so many stress chemicals during the break that the chamber's air recycling systems were working at maximum capacity. Our trade networks are functioning, but every transaction now requires approval from companies we never heard of before today. Companies that somehow have override authority in systems we thought we controlled completely. Economic structures can be surprisingly complex, Reed observed. Ownership patterns, regulatory frameworks, operational hierarchies, they are all more complicated than they appear on the surface. A single well-placed investment 50 years ago can grow into controlling interest in an entire economic sector. Given proper cultivation and patience, High Chancellor Vexani leaned forward, her tentacles coiling with desperate purpose. There must be something you want, some demand you wish to make. No species orchestrates deception on this scale without an ultimate goal. Reed was silent for a long moment, studying the holographic display that still showed the true extent of human infiltration across the galaxy. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of something that might have been sadness. What we want, honored Chancellor, is what we have already taken. The right to exist without asking permission. For 50 years we operated under the assumption that contact with galactic civilization was inevitable, and that when it came, we would be found lacking. Your own history provided clear evidence of what happens to species that fail to meet the Council's standards. The chamber fell silent. Every delegate knew the truth of that statement. So we prepared, Reed continued. We infiltrated your systems, learned your weaknesses, positioned ourselves to survive whatever judgment you might render. And then we waited. Waited for what? Asked the Corval representative. For this moment. For the day when humanity would stand accused of existing beyond our designated boundaries. For the trial that would determine whether our species lived or died. Reed's smile was cold as space itself. The irony is that you brought us here to judge us for crimes we had not yet committed, only to discover that we had already committed far worse ones. The implications settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. The Council had not been meeting to address human expansion. They had been preparing to discuss humanity's elimination. The territorial violations were merely the excuse they needed to justify actions they had already decided to take. High Chancellor Vexani seemed to age another 1,000 years in the space of a heartbeat. How did you know our intentions? Your own communication networks, Reed replied. We have been monitoring Council transmissions for decades. The preliminary discussions about the human problem, the resource allocation studies, the fleet movement orders disguised as routine exercises. You have been planning our extinction for 3 years. Admiral Corks's claws scraped against his chair's metal armrests. The purification protocol. A comprehensive plan for the sterilization of human-occupied worlds, followed by the redistribution of our resources among Council member species. Reed confirmed. Quite thorough, actually. We were impressed by the attention to detail. The Veltari representative's form flickered with what might have been shame. You must understand. The computer simulations showed that humanity's expansion rate would eventually pose a threat to galactic stability. We believed it was a necessary preventive measure. Preventive, Reed repeated thoughtfully. Another interesting word choice. Tell me, when you look at this holographic display showing the true extent of human presence in the galaxy, do you still believe the threat was merely theoretical? The question hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. Every delegate could see the evidence before them. Humanity had not been expanding into empty space. They had been expanding into the shadows of occupied space, weaving themselves through the gaps in galactic civilization like blood through veins. You turned us into the threat you feared, Reed said quietly. Your terror of what we might become drove you to create exactly the scenario you sought to prevent. If you had simply left us alone, we would have remained a minor species on the galactic edge, perhaps trading with neighbors, perhaps occasionally causing small diplomatic problems. Instead, your planned genocide forced us to become something far more dangerous. The Mektar delegate released a burst of chemical signals that roughly translated to existential horror. What are you? What have you become? Reed studied the alien for a moment before answering. We are what you made us, a species that learned survival by becoming indispensable. Every service you rely on, every convenience you take for granted, every system that keeps your civilization functioning, we are woven into all of it. Remove us now, and the galaxy does not return to its previous state. It collapses completely. The holographic display shifted once more, showing the flow of essential resources throughout galactic space. Food shipments, medical supplies, industrial materials, energy production, waste management, transportation networks, all interconnected, all dependent on systems with human involvement at crucial points. This is why we prefer shadows, Reed explained. Visible rulers can be overthrown, obvious threats can be eliminated, direct challenges can be met with military force. But how do you wage war against your own circulatory system? How do you defeat an enemy that exists in the spaces between your heartbeats? High Chancellor Vexani slumped in her chair, the weight of millennia suddenly too much to bear.
We cannot, can we?
Even if we could somehow remove human influence from our systems, the disruption would kill billions of our people. Tens of billions, Reed corrected gently. The death toll from complete systemic collapse would exceed anything achieved by direct military action. Starvation, medical crises, economic breakdown, social disorder, it would cascade across the galaxy like a plague. Admiral Corks's voice was barely a whisper. You have made yourselves the immune system of galactic civilization. An excellent comparison, Reed agreed. And like any immune system, we respond aggressively to perceived threats. The purification protocol, for instance, represents exactly the kind of existential danger that would trigger a comprehensive response. The display changed again, showing the location of every Council homeworld, every major fleet base, every critical infrastructure hub. Red markers appeared next to each one, human assets positioned to neutralize threats before they could fully develop. This is the choice before you, Reed said, his voice carrying the finality of a death sentence. You can return to your worlds and resume the illusion of governance, accepting that humanity will continue to operate from the shadows, or you can attempt to resist and watch your civilization destroy itself in the process. The silence that followed was the sound of an empire realizing it had already died. 10 hours had passed since Reed's revelation began, and the great council chamber had taken on the atmosphere of a funeral. Some delegates sat in shell-shocked silence. Others continued their futile attempts to contact homeworlds that were no longer truly under their control. A few had simply left, unable to process the magnitude of their civilization's transformation. Ambassador Reed had not moved from his position at the center of the chamber. He seemed content to wait as long as necessary for the reality of the situation to fully penetrate alien consciousness. High Chancellor Vexani finally broke the silence. Her voice, carrying the hollow tone of someone who had watched everything she believed in, turned to dust. In all my millennia, I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed the birth of technologies that reshaped reality itself. I have presided over the evolution of consciousness across 1,000 worlds. She paused, her ancient eyes fixed on the human ambassador. But I have never seen anything like this. You have not conquered us, you have made conquest meaningless. Reed nodded slowly. Conquest requires enemies. What you are describing is more like symbiosis. Your civilizations will continue to flourish, your species will continue to evolve, your cultures will continue to grow. The only difference is that you will do so within a framework that ensures certain outcomes. Outcomes favorable to humanity, Admiral Corks stated flatly. Outcomes favorable to stability, Reed corrected, which, yes, are also favorable to humanity. But they are equally favorable to every species in this chamber. The galaxy we have helped create is more prosperous, more peaceful, and more secure than the one that existed before human contact. The Veltari representative's crystalline form pulsed with confused patterns. But the cost? The loss of autonomy, of self-determination. Was that autonomy real? Reed asked. Before humanity made contact with galactic civilization, how many species had the Council eliminated in the name of stability? How many worlds had been stripped of resources? How many cultures had been erased for developing inconvenient technologies or ideologies? The chamber remained silent. They all knew the answer. We did not take your freedom, Reed continued. We simply changed the nature of your limitations. Instead of being trapped by the Council's authoritarian control, you are now supported by humanity's guidance. Your people live better lives, your worlds are more prosperous, and your species survive conflicts that would have destroyed them under the old system. But it is still control, the Mektar delegate observed, his chemical emissions carrying notes of resignation. Every civilization exists within some form of control, Reed replied philosophically. The question is whether that control protects or imprisons. Under the old system, species either conformed to the Council's vision or faced extinction. Under the new system, species flourish according to their nature while contributing to the greater stability of the whole. High Chancellor Vexani struggled to process this perspective. You speak of this as if it were benevolent, is it not? Reed's expression was genuinely curious. Your homeworld's population has grown by 30% since human contact. Your average lifespan has increased by 200 years. Your economic output has tripled. Crime rates have dropped to historic lows. Territorial disputes have virtually disappeared. By any objective measure, your species is significantly better off now than before. Because you have been manipulating our society from within. Because we have been optimizing your society from within. Reed corrected gently. The techniques are similar, but the intent is crucial. A parasite weakens its host for personal gain. A symbiont strengthens its host for mutual benefit. The holographic display shifted once more, showing not the extent of human infiltration, but the results of that infiltration. Charts and graphs appeared, demonstrating improved living standards, reduced conflict rates, enhanced technological development, and expanded life expectancy across dozens of species. This is what you have accomplished, Reed said, gesturing to the data. This is the galaxy you have helped create. Yes, humanity guided the process. Yes, we influenced outcomes. But the benefits are real, and they are shared by everyone. Admiral Corks leaned forward, his massive frame radiating skepticism. And if we disagree with your guidance? If we choose a path you find unacceptable? Reed's smile was patient, almost fatherly. Then we help you understand why that path would be harmful to your interests. Sometimes that education takes the form of economic incentives. Sometimes it involves the strategic placement of information or opportunities. Occasionally it requires more direct intervention. Like the Zephyrin Plague. Like the Zephyrin Plague, Reed acknowledged without shame. The Zephyrins had developed a weapon capable of igniting stellar cores. They were preparing to test it on their own sun, which would have triggered a chain reaction that could have sterilized half the galaxy. We tried more subtle methods of discouragement first, but they were committed to their course of action. The revelation hit the chamber like a physical blow. The Zephyrin extinction had always been presented as a tragic accident, a plague that struck down a peaceful species at the height of their cultural achievements. To learn that they had been developing weapons of galactic destruction, and that humanity had stopped them, changed everything. The galaxy never knew. The Corval representative whispered. The galaxy did not need to know, Reed replied. Fear would have destabilized interstellar relations for centuries. Better to mourn a tragic loss than to live in terror of potential doomsday weapons. High Chancellor Vexani's tentacles had gone perfectly still, a sign of deep, almost meditative thought. How many other crises have you managed without our knowledge? 47 major extinction-level threats, 312 potential war scenarios, and approximately 15,000 minor diplomatic or economic situations that could have escalated into larger problems. Reed delivered the statistics with the casual air of someone reciting a shopping list. Most of the interventions were so subtle that even we sometimes debate whether they were truly necessary. The sheer scope of humanity's hidden involvement in galactic affairs was staggering. For 50 years, they had been the invisible guardians of civilization, preventing disasters that no one else knew existed, and solving problems before they became crises. You have been protecting us, the Veltari representative said, her voice filled with something approaching wonder. We have been protecting everyone, Reed corrected, including ourselves. A stable galaxy serves humanity's interests just as much as it serves yours. The difference is that we took responsibility for ensuring that stability rather than simply hoping it would maintain itself. Admiral, Corks was struggling with concepts that challenged everything he believed about power and control. But you could have ruled openly. With your capabilities, you could have conquered the galaxy by force. Force is inefficient, Reed explained. Conquered populations resist. Occupied worlds rebel. Authoritarian control requires constant vigilance and inevitable violence. Much better to create a system where everyone chooses to cooperate because cooperation serves their interests. Even when that choice is based on incomplete information, especially when that choice is based on incomplete information. Reed's smile turned slightly sad. How many of your citizens would sleep well at night if they knew about every existential threat that passes through their system? How many would make rational decisions if they understood the true complexity of interstellar politics? Sometimes ignorance really is a form of bliss. The holographic display faded, leaving only the assembled delegates and the weight of their new reality. In the silence that followed, each alien representative grappled with fundamental questions that Reed's revelations had raised. What was the value of autonomy if it led to self-destruction? What was the cost of security if it required surrendering sovereignty? What was the meaning of civilization if it depended on invisible manipulation. High Chancellor Vexani was the first to reach a conclusion. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone making a decision that would echo through history. The Council will adapt to these new circumstances. We will return to our worlds and resume our duties, understanding that we operate within a larger framework of stability that we did not create but can choose to support. A wise decision, Reed said simply. But we have conditions. Reed's eyebrows rose slightly. Conditions? Transparency when possible. If humanity is to guide galactic civilization, we deserve to understand the reasoning behind that guidance. Not every detail perhaps, but enough to make informed choices about our cooperation. Reed considered this for a moment. Within reasonable limits, that seems acceptable. And accountability. If human actions cause harm to our people, we need ways to address those problems. Also reasonable, though I would point out that our track record suggests such issues are likely to be rare. The beginning of a new galactic order was taking shape in the ancient chamber. Admiral Corks found his voice again, though it carried less authority than before. And the guarantee that this arrangement serves the interests of all species, not just humanity. That guarantee has already been demonstrated, Reed replied, gesturing to where the holographic display had shown improved conditions across the galaxy. But yes, humanity accepts the responsibility to maintain that balance. The Mektar delegate released a complex burst of chemicals that roughly translated to cautious acceptance. And if humanity itself becomes a threat to galactic stability? Who watches the Watchers? Reed's expression grew thoughtful. An excellent question. Perhaps that is something the Council should consider as it adapts to its new role. After all, even invisible guardians need oversight. The suggestion that the Council might have a part to play in monitoring humanity created a flicker of hope in several alien minds. It was not independence, but it was not complete subjugation either. High Chancellor Vexani rose slowly from her chair, her ancient frame somehow managing to convey dignity despite the circumstances. Then let it be recorded that on this day, the Galactic Council acknowledged a new reality and chose to work within it rather than resist it. May future generations understand that we made this choice not from weakness, but from wisdom. As the delegates began to file out of the chamber, each returning to worlds that were no longer quite their own, Ambassador Reed remained seated at the defendant's table. The trial that was supposed to judge humanity's crimes had instead revealed the trial of galactic civilization itself. But the real transformation was only beginning. 3 months after the revelation, the galaxy had settled into what historians would later call the Quiet Revolution. On the surface, nothing had changed. The Council still met, governments still functioned, trade still flowed between worlds. Citizens across thousands of species went about their daily lives unaware that their civilization had fundamentally transformed. But in the hidden places between the stars, humanity's true work continued. Dr. Elena Torres stood on the observation deck of Shadow Station 7, watching automated construction ships assemble another research facility in the depths of the Void Nebula. The station was one of hundreds that had been operating in secret for decades, but now its existence was known to the Council leadership. The Veltari crystal technology integration is proceeding ahead of schedule, reported Commander James Walsh, approaching with a datapad in hand. Their scientists believe they are developing it independently, but our guidance has accelerated their progress by approximately 200 years. Torres nodded, studying the report scrolling across her screen. What about the Corval hive mind project? More delicate. Their species' natural telepathic abilities could be incredibly useful for galactic communication networks, but they are still suspicious of any outside influence. We are proceeding very slowly. Good. The last thing we need is another Zephyrin situation. Torres pulled up a star map, showing the current status of human operations across the galaxy. Green dots indicated successful integration, yellow showed ongoing projects, and the rare red marks highlighted potential problems. What about Admiral Corks's fleet? Still disabled, but we have been providing technical assistance disguised as Council support. His crews believe they are repairing the systems themselves. Within 6 months, they will be fully operational again with several significant improvements they do not yet understand. Torres smiled. This was the art of invisible governance, making subjects grateful for their own subjugation, while believing they maintained their freedom. It required patience, subtlety, and an understanding of psychology that few species possessed. Any word from Ambassador Reed? He is still on the Council homeworld, participating in what they are calling integration discussions. The aliens believe they are negotiating terms for humanity's continued participation in galactic affairs. In reality, they are learning to accept their new role in our system. The irony was not lost on Torres. For 50 years, humanity had operated in the shadows because they feared the galaxy's judgment. Now they operated in the shadows because it was more efficient than open rule. Dr. Torres, came a voice from the communication station. Priority transmission from Earth Central Command. Torres accepted the encrypted message, reading its contents with growing interest. After decades of hidden expansion, Earth's leadership had finally decided to reveal humanity's true capabilities to their own people. The official story would be carefully crafted. Humanity had developed advanced technology in secret to ensure survival in a dangerous galaxy. The full extent of their infiltration of alien civilizations would remain classified for another generation. James, initiate Protocol 7 across all human installations. It is time for our people to know what we have accomplished. Across the galaxy, human settlements that had operated in complete secrecy for decades began to emerge from the shadows, not into full visibility, that would have caused panic among alien populations, but into acknowledgement by Earth's government and humanity's official records. On a mining world in the Outer Rim, workers who had spent their entire lives believing they were part of a classified Earth defense project learned that their asteroid facility was actually located 15,000 light-years from home. Deep in alien territory, in a research station hidden in a gas giant's atmosphere, scientists discovered that their breakthrough, discoveries in quantum mechanics, had been crucial to maintaining humanity's invisible empire for the past 3 decades. On colony worlds that did not officially exist, families learned that their communities had been the advance guard of human expansion, establishing footholds in regions that the galaxy believed were uninhabitable. The revelation was carefully managed, released gradually to prevent shock or social disruption. But slowly, humanity began to understand the true scope of what their species had accomplished. Meanwhile, in the council chambers, the alien delegates continued their meetings, believing they were adapting to new circumstances. They established committees to monitor human activities, created oversight protocols for interspecies cooperation, and drafted agreements that they thought would protect their interests. High Chancellor Vexani had aged visibly since the revelation, but she had also found a new purpose. If humanity was going to guide galactic civilization, then she would ensure that guidance remained benevolent. She did not realize that her very desire to provide oversight was exactly what humanity wanted from her. The integration proceeds smoothly, she reported to the assembled council. Human representatives have been remarkably cooperative in establishing transparency protocols. They have agreed to regular reports on their activities and accepted our right to monitor their interventions in galactic affairs. What she did not know was that those reports were carefully crafted to show exactly what humanity wanted the council to see. The monitoring systems they had established could only detect activities that humans allowed them to detect. The oversight they believed they were providing was simply another layer of the illusion. 6 months after the revelation, Ambassador Reed stood once again in the council chamber, but this time he was not alone. Human representatives now sat among the alien delegates, officially recognized as participants in galactic governance. The latest stability reports show continued improvement across all monitored sectors, Reed announced, presenting data that the council had learned to trust. Conflict incidents are down 70% from historical averages. Economic growth has exceeded projections in 83% of member systems. Life expectancy continues to increase across all species. The aliens nodded approvingly, proud of their successful adaptation to the new order. They believed they had found a way to maintain their autonomy while benefiting from human guidance. They never suspected that every statistic Reed presented, every improvement he described, and every success he reported had been carefully orchestrated by humanity's invisible hand. In the shadows between the stars, construction continued on facilities that would never appear on any official map. Research progressed on technologies that would reshape the galaxy without anyone knowing their true origin. And quietly, patiently, humanity continued to expand into every corner of civilized space. The galaxy had realized too late that humanity's shadows had already moved. But perhaps, in the end, that was for the best. Outside the crystal dome of the council chamber, the stars continued their ancient dance, unaware that the civilization that watched them had been quietly transformed. In ships hidden in dark nebulae and installations concealed in asteroid fields, humanity continued its silent vigil, guardian and guided both, protector and protected. The age of open galactic governance had ended. The age of enlightened shepherding had begun, and in the spaces between starlight, humanity watched and waited as they always had, as they always would. The galaxy was safe, prosperous, and peaceful, even if it never knew who was responsible.